Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Third Impact Anime Podcast, where we are going to be traveling into space to have a existential ghost breakdown with our favorite opera singer. I am joined by people that could probably make a much better intro than me. I am joined by Bill. How's it going, Bill?
Somehow people keep running away from me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's this distinctive smell. I don't know what's going on.
Did you recently eat a very nasty sundae?
Possibly, maybe some onions to add onto that. So we'll see.
You want to be careful with that breath. Speaking of breath, how's it going, Tori?
Good. I'm here to trap weak-willed men in a hologram for the rest of their mortal life.
Cool. What about you, Tobias?
I'm doing pretty good. I just got back working the shift at the Cannon Factory / Betsy Ross Museum, and boy, let me tell you.
So was your shift also basically in one continuous shot?
You could say that.
I feel like I should say that. All right. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about the 1995 anime anthology from Katsuhiro Otomo, Memories. But before that, we're just going to do a little bit of catch-up as we do. Actually, even before the catch-up, we have something very, very exciting to announce. Courtesy of the very kind and the illustrious Mr. Bill Foreman, he has decided to purchase a brand new copy of Volume 1 of the Rose of Versailles anime TV series. It is, if anybody has been paying attention to that license recently, they would know that unfortunately Right Stuff and Nozomi Entertainment has lost the license to that show. So there will, at least for the foreseeable future, there will not be any more copies of that show made available to purchase. It is no longer on streaming anywhere, and it is only going to get more difficult to come across. So Bill has acquired a copy of Volume 1 of that, and would like to give it away on our show.
Yeah, and the first volume, or part 1, you get 25 episodes, I believe, in the first set, so you get a lot of content to chew on as you go through the show.
Mm-hmm. And as we have all sort of learned lately as consumers of media, you can never truly rely 100% on streaming to be your go-to thing. So that's why physical media will always be king. It may take up shelf space, but it's the best way to guarantee that you will be able to watch the things and play the games that you want to watch and play. So, that being said, the way that you, dear listener, can participate in our giveaway project is if you would go over to our iTunes account and leave us a review. We would really, really appreciate that, because that helps us for visibility on iTunes. If you leave a review and leave a star rating, that helps more people find the show through that particular outlet. And if you're able to do that, we will put your username that you indicate on your review into a random name generator, and we will just sort of roll it, and whoever is the winner is the winner.
A random name generator?
No, a random thing generator, like a list of things, and it will generate a thing and make it. You know what I'm talking about.
We're just gonna take all the names and jam them together and make a Lovecraftian nonsense word.
We're gonna break the DVDs and like send them in pieces to each of the people, and they have to meet up in real life and put the disc back together. And this is very stupid.
I think for this, what we should do is for every star you give us in the review, you get an entry.
I don't know, man. That's a lot of power to give to one person. I don't know if I'm cool with that. But the way that you are able to find out if you are the winner or not is that you have to go to our Facebook community and join us over there. If you are someone that doesn't use Facebook, well, you're a better person than me. However, if you do not review us on Facebook, or excuse me, review us on iTunes and then join the Facebook community, you will not know if you have won or not. So that is really the only way to find out. And if you want this brand new, very, very limited copy of the Rose of Versailles Volume 1, this is one of the only ways to get a hold of it, and it will be absolutely free just for you at the cost of only one simple iTunes review.
Of 5 stars.
Do we want to make that stipulation? Does it have to be a 5-star? Yeah, I think yes, it does have to be a 5-star review.
Well, I mean, ethically we shouldn't do that, but practically we're going to do that.
Oh yeah, we're totally buying votes here. This is highly unethical.
Good. We want our egos and our emotions to feel good, so 5 stars makes us feel...
journalism.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bribe. I will go on record and be like, this is thoroughly 100% a bribe. But I don't really think that we're above that, so I think we're cool.
Yeah.
That's fair.
All right, so now with the bribery out of the way... Oh, and I did want to mention that the contest will begin the day that this episode goes up. And it will end exactly 1 month from that day. And then we will be reminding folks in the Facebook group as well, and on our social media pages and whatnot, that the contest is active. But we really need those reviews in, and we would really appreciate them from all of you guys. All right, so how did everybody's Halloween go?
Mine was pretty busy. I moved, which was exciting. So I wasn't really able to partake in a lot of Halloween festivities. The only thing I really did during Halloween was watch this really good, I don't know if you'd call it an anthology movie, Trick or Treat. I think it came out about 10 years ago, and it's this really fun horror movie where it's all these small different events happening in this one town, and some of them have like a supernatural element to them, and it's just really fun. It doesn't have an all-star cast, but there's some notable names like Anna Paquin from True Blood's in it, and Brian Cox, who's a well-known character actor, like he's in the Jason Bourne movies. There's one other name I'm forgetting, but overall I highly recommend it. Shout Factory just put out a really good release of it on Blu-ray. And it's a cool kind of anthology where it's not broken up into part 1, part 2, kind of like Creepshow. It's broken up where they kind of do a Pulp Fiction thing where they go back and forth between the stories. So
neat.
It keeps you focused, and so don't worry if you don't like one story, they'll quickly go to another one that you might find interesting.
So did you watch that on streaming, or did you get a copy of it physically?
I got a copy of it physically, thanks to my brother, who is all about the physical media.
Yeah, I've been trying to find that movie like all season, because that's one thing that I've been hearing a lot more about that lately, like people revisiting that movie and really, showing off how cool it is. And I really wanted to watch it, but I couldn't find it up on streaming anywhere, and the Blu-ray was still a little bit more expensive for me to blind buy. So I sort of skipped out on that one. But with your recommendation, I'm a little bit more inclined to want to pick it up.
Yeah, and as someone who's not a particular horror fan, I found this movie pretty fun.
Yeah,
so
I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
I think I watched it last year, and after kind of been putting it off for the decade that it's been out, and I really enjoyed it as well.
Sweet. Cool.
How about our resident horror expert, Tori? Have you seen Trick or Treat?
I actually have not seen it. But one day, probably when Austin gets around to buying it, I'll watch it with him. But
I see how it is.
because you don't watch horror things unless you're watching them with me, so I called you out in front of everybody. But
I guess that's mostly true.
But yeah, I remember when that movie came out, and I was always really interested in it because they would cover it a lot, in like a lot of horror magazines. Speaking of which, is like Fangoria even a thing that's published physically anymore? Because I would go look for it like over the past year and could never find it. But
I know they probably have a podcast.
I bet you they do.
Podcasts are for losers.
But yeah, that movie was really popular for a while when it came out, and then like everybody else said, it's like everybody's kind of revisiting it and finding out that it's as good as they remember, which is good, I guess. I don't know, because I've never seen it, but...
So Fangoria is definitely still active. I don't know if they do a print magazine. Maybe it's like mail order only or something, but it is definitely still a thing.
You used to be able to buy it pretty much anywhere you could get magazines, because I used to like obsessively buy it.
Cool. Well, how was your Halloween, Tobias?
It was pretty great. I also watched a movie, that movie being Halloween, the original.
Nice.
I put that off for a long time and finally sat down and watched that. For that, really enjoyed it. It definitely is a prototypical slasher film, so you could definitely see that early DNA for all that kind of, that type of film in that. I really enjoyed that. Might go check out the new sequel that just came out. I've heard good things about that.
The Jason Blum
and other than that,
one.
Yeah. Other than that, I also saw Bad Times at the El Royale, which just came out about a month ago, I want to say. And I'd also highly recommend that. Really enjoyable movie.
Yeah, I think my uncle told me about that. I'm just like, I think he told me it had Jeff Bridges in it. Is that right?
Yeah. He's one of
It's
the
like an all-star. It's like an all-star cast. It's like Jeff Bridges, that girl who was in the 50 Shades of Grey movies, and Chris Hemsworth's in it.
Nick Offerman shows up for 5 minutes.
Nice. All right, I'm sold. You told me that, I'm good.
But the trailers for that movie look really interesting. So
yeah.
I probably missed the theater window, but whenever it comes out on home video, I'll probably go check it out.
No, yeah, I really enjoyed it. For all of the all-star, I think the one that I think the probably least well-known, Cynthia Erivo, really stole the show. Her character, Darlene Sweet, was just so great.
Cool. Well, definitely have to check that one out because it was like totally off my radar. Didn't hear about it at all until it was in theaters. So it's, and you're not the only person to say that it's pretty good. So I will check that out as well.
How about yourself?
Well, most of my Halloween is sort of spread out throughout the month because I think I mentioned it in the other episode, but I work at a haunted house that's like 45 minutes ish from my house. So that takes up pretty much my Fridays and Saturday nights during the season. But the season was really good. It was very solid. We tried a couple of new things. We got a few new little set pieces here and there to play with, and working at a haunt is just a really great experience. Like, all the people that work there are just fabulous, and they take their acting very seriously. It's not just it's like, we're gonna hire you and we're gonna stick you in this corner, put a mask on you, and you're gonna say "Rrr." So we don't really do that. It's more about, like, you come up with this character and you sort of really embody like who this character is. You get to know them, and you sort of evolve as you go on through improvisation stuff. And like, the role that I have is not so much like a scary role. It's more of like an entertainment sort of comedy role, I guess. But it's sort of just like myself, but exaggerated to like the nth degree. So that's always kind of fun to be able to let loose and intellectually terrorize the denizens of the Pilot Mountain.
So what you're saying is in the middle of this haunted house, you're recording an anime podcast?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. Like, it's almost exactly like that.
Interesting.
I will often talk about anime as my character if I see someone's if I see someone like wearing a t-shirt or something, I'll talk to them as my character about it, because I do get like some very extended improv time, like, just because of the nature of my station. So there are portions of the haunt where, like, if you are an actor, you might be interacting with a guest for maybe like a minute or like 5 minutes or something very small. Sometimes the interactions are as quick as just a second or what have you, but like with my role, it's more of like an extended improv thing. So I'm out there with the same group of people for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how fast or slow the line moves. So I really get a good opportunity to come up with some pretty ridiculous routines, and try and, you know, keep that stream of consciousness flow going really crazy. So that's fun. So that's the main portion of my Halloween. I did watch a couple of scary movies. I watched Carrie. I watched one of the Hammer Dracula movies. What else? Didn't we watch something, Tori, that wasn't Mandy?
Sadako versus Kayako.
That's true, we watched that. That was stupid and fun. Got to hear the Japanese pronunciation of meme a lot.
Yeah.
And we went to see Venom. It wasn't a horror movie, but that movie was
The
really a
best
lot better than it
rom-com
should have
I've
been.
ever seen.
It was actually really entertaining. Like, I liked it a lot. It was...
I heard the worst part is just the chemistry between the two leads, like Tom Hardy and I forget who the love interest is, but they have like no chemistry whatsoever.
Well, you're talking about the love interest, you mean the alien, right?
Yes, the symbiote.
Now those
Yep.
two, that's the best romance I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
But
the true
yeah, like-
the true love story is between Venom and the man.
Yes,
Yes.
man and monster. You know, put aside their differences to love each other and embody the same body.
So you say this, but I thought that was literally the way the movie went down,
No, that is the plot.
according to
Yeah.
the internet.
That's pretty much the way it is. It's a little bit far fetched how they suddenly get like the symbiote to be a good guy. He's basically just like, you know what? I don't want to eat every human being. I only want to eat the bad human beings because I kind of like Earth. And he establishes that he's a good guy in like a paragraph of dialogue. But
It's because where else is
it's
he
funny.
going to get, what is it he wants to eat? Chocolate and like hash browns or tater tots. Where else is he going to get tater tots and chocolate other than on Earth?
That's true. You can't get it out in space. I guess not.
Well, the real symbiote is the friends we made along the way.
You are all my symbiote.
Well,
Ooh.
I can't wait for Venom 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Man, I hope so. Like, if they make a sequel to this movie, you know, I'll be first in line because it
Oh,
was
absolutely.
it was
Buddy
so much
cop.
better than it should have been. You know?
Oh, don't worry. The memes made sure that got the box office numbers to go up, so it's probably gonna get a sequel.
Good. I mean, and what I liked in the grander sense of like superhero movies in general is that like the movie was vague enough that if you just wanted to use your imagination to say, yes, this does take place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yes, Spider-Man does exist, and he is played by Tom Holland, and he lives in New York. You could totally watch that movie with that mindset, because they don't really do anything to explicitly state one way or another that this movie takes place in another world. And I think that's really smart, because with Sony already setting the precedent of like allowing Spider-Man to be in the MCU, it's entirely possible that they do bring Venom into it. So I think that the thought of having this movie like take place in San Francisco, take place in like on the other side of the country, like not really involved with anything that could be involved with like the New York superheroes, I think that was a really smart move. So Tori, how was your Halloween?
I spent it working, unfortunately, so I wasn't able to go out and do anything. My sister borrowed my Sailor Moon cosplay and was absolutely precious. So
Aw.
her Halloween was much, much better than mine. She said she had like quite a few people recognize her as Sailor Moon. But other than that, I finished up The Haunting of Hill House around Halloween time, and that was very, very enjoyable. And I've been playing through Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon.
Hey, that's a good sort of spectrum of Halloween to participate in.
Yeah, so I had my own little celebration, and I've spent most of October catching up on movies I hadn't seen, and didn't get through as many as I was hoping to, but I still made some progress, I guess.
I mean, we watched Sadako versus Kayako, and that's like the most important movie that has ever been made.
That's very true.
Yes.
And just because we're in November now doesn't mean you have to stop watching horror movies. I mean, I'm going to make you two watch Life Force now that I know that it's on Amazon Prime.
Man, that movie has just, piqued my curiosity in such a bizarre way ever since I saw it in Electric Boogaloo. So I just have to check it out. I just gotta. It's kind of like how I felt about Mandy. I was just like, I don't really know anything about this movie, but man, I gotta check it out. Oh man, I also watched Tusk. I forgot about that. Ooh. Well, now's a really good time to segue into the main topic.
Wait, quick question about Tusk though.
I don't want to talk about Tusk.
Well, it's a podcast related question though, because they're podcasters in the movie.
Yes, they are.
So, do I get an ad for LegalZoom or Mack Weldon or a typical Blue Apron, a typical podcast
Casper
sponsor?
mattresses.
Yeah, Casper mattresses.
I think that they did have some sort of like podcast sponsor, or maybe it was that they were selling their own T-shirts or something like that. But there was something like that where they like tried to hawk something on the podcast, but unfortunately, it was none of the above. But that would have been really funny.
That's the only thing exciting about that movie is podcast representation.
Well, Kevin Smith's got his own podcast, so whoever sponsors him, I don't even know if he's got sponsors or not. He should have roped them into this scheme. Tusk, brought to you by Blue Apron.
MeUndies.
Yeah.
Squarespace.
Make your dedicated Walrus fan site. Anyway, we're going to talk about some anime now. You guys excited?
No.
Yes.
Wait, Tusk is an anime?
No. Shut up. Okay. So we're going to take a very quick break, and whenever we get back, we're going to be talking about the 1995 anime anthology film from Katsuhiro Otomo and a variety of other very prolific and talented creators, Memories. So before we jump into our review, I just wanted to remind everyone that much like any creator on the internet, we have a plethora of social media options for all of your social media needs, including a Facebook page that we update pretty often, facebook.com/thirdimpactanime. We also have a fairly active Twitter, which is at @TI_anime, and I have recently revived the Tumblr page, which is thirdimpactanime.tumblr.com, and I don't really use it for all that much, except for like curating just a queue of good like anime content from a bunch of different shows that we like. So if you're looking for just like a reblog factory, that would be a good option for you if you are a Tumblr user. We also have our WordPress, where we put up all of our panel notes and all of our show notes for our various podcast episodes, and that can be found at thirdimpactanime.wordpress.com. Have there been any articles that we put up lately?
Yes, I can think of one.
Okay.
This might be a little bit of old news by this comes out, but I recently wrote up a piece on the Funimation Crunchyroll breakup involving what's happening to Verve and where all the shows are going, to who's going to who. It's like a sad, messy divorce of a celebrity couple that you don't want to happen, but it's sadly happening.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that piece. So if you guys are curious as to what Bill's take is on that, I would highly recommend going to read his piece on that, because it's very well thought out. You think of a lot of the different contexts in which that might be a problem, and some of the good things that are going to come out of it.
Yeah, there's some good things, like High Dive's coming to Verve, which is good, and maybe Funimation will, since they're on their own island now, they can step up their game. Like, I don't know, putting Your Name on streaming, maybe a little film that's barely anyone's heard about.
Yeah, it didn't even show up on my radar. Whose name? What name? Oh, anyway. Oops. All right, folks. So, Memories. Very excited to talk about this. So, Memories is an anime anthology film produced by Katsuhiro Otomo and animated by Studio 4C and Studio Madhouse. If you've ever seen 1987's Robot Carnival, it is very similar to that in the sense that it is a collection of shorts from different screenplay writers, animators, and directors. But what makes Memories unique is that each of the three pieces in the film are based on either screenplays or manga that were created by Otomo, but each was taken and sort of reimagined by their respective directors. If you folks are not familiar with Katsuhiro Otomo, he is the creator, writer, and director of AKIRA, among other things. So the chief creative talents on this particular project are Koji Morimoto, Tensai Okamura, and of course Katsuhiro Otomo. So Koji Morimoto is the director of the first short, Magnetic Rose, which is probably the most well-recognized piece from this particular anthology. He worked together with the Satoshi Kon on the screenplay, sort of revamping it and adding things from Otomo's original version. And since Morimoto had worked with her on Macross Plus just about a year prior, he brought on Yoko Kanno to do the music for Magnetic Rose. This was released 3 years before Perfect Blue came out, and was released 4 years before Cowboy Bebop came out. So neither Yoko Kanno nor Satoshi Kon had really come close to hitting their critical mass as creators yet, though they both had been in the industry for a while at this point. So before Memories, Koji Morimoto had been the co-founder of Studio 4C, and he directed the Franken's Gear segment of Robot Carnival, which is the first segment in the anthology, excluding the opening. He was also an animator on AKIRA, where he obviously met Katsuhiro Otomo. He also worked on City Hunter, Fist of the North Star, and Macross Do You Remember Love, among many other things. He would later go on to storyboard the film Tekkon Kincrete at Studio 4C in the early 2000s, and he would animate the opening of Otomo's most recent anthology, Short Piece, which came out in, I want to say, 2014 or so.
Right.
Tori and I got to see that in theaters. That was cool. So Tensai Okamura is the director of the second short, Stink Bomb. He worked for Studio Madhouse for a number of years, working on another Otomo-related anthology piece, Neo Tokyo, from 1987. He was a key animator on Neon Genesis Evangelion, The Wings of Honiamis, the original Ghost in the Shell movie, My Neighbor Totoro, Mobile Suit Gundam Stardust Memory, and a bunch of other things. He directed 7 episodes of Cowboy Bebop, and in the 2000s, he directed Wolf's Rain, which probably a lot of people remember from the Toonami days. And he directed episodes of Full Metal Panic, Soul Eater, and was the director and the creator of the Darker Than Black franchise.
Really good first season, and then it goes completely downhill, sadly, for me.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I've never finished Darker Than Black, so I really wonder why that is, because so many people say that season 1 was like so great, but season 2 just like totally drops the ball.
It's the answer to your question is amnesia plot.
Yep. And it gets weird.
That too.
So one of Otomo's major considerations in making Memories was the international market for anime at the time. He looked at the elements of what international audiences really enjoyed about AKIRA, which to him was like the incredibly fluid animation style, the larger-than-life sci-fi settings, and just a really stellar soundtrack. And he tried to replicate that in this new project without being too similar to AKIRA. He said there's a really good documentary on the DVD that, Bill, did you get a chance to watch that?
I watched a bit of it, and it was interesting hearing them talk about their process and how he wanted to approach this. But from what you previously just stated, I'm a little surprised that he tried to make this for an international audience, because just the way it's structured, I think this would really work well at a film festival and in kind of art houses, but I don't see it getting mainstream success if that's what he was hoping for. Where if he wanted that, then having one central narrative probably would be more appealing to a wider audience.
Yeah, you're generally right with that because like there is sort of a precedent of anthology films like not doing so well in Japan and like sort of only doing well in the US as sort of like niche artsy things.
Yeah,
Um,
and anthologies rarely do well at the box office. Like the only anthologies that I know that have done well are usually like horror or sci-fi themed, like the Twilight Zone anthology film from the 80s did well, or Creepshow, which is a horror anthology.
yeah, I don't know if like necessarily the streaming culture would change the need for anthologies because like you look at something like Black Mirror, which is effectively like an anthology show, and it was highly successful.
Well, I think that just goes down to the structure of what an anthology is, because I think anthologies, by their nature, works well in a TV style format because
Right.
you're only there for a limited amount of time, and because you have the distance between episodes, you can move on to a new story, and so it's not as jarring to the audience member if you're going from one segment to the other, and you don't lose that momentum too.
I think some of Black Mirror's success too lends to the fact that like a lot of the episodes are really shocking, like not like necessarily a grotesque way, but it's just like, oh my god, they did that. Whoa, that's the plot twist, like kind of thing.
So you think more of Black Mirror's appeal is more so the content rather than the form?
Personally, yes, and the trend, like the anthologies have been on a trend for a while now, so I think, I don't know, like necessarily the cause of that, but I think a lot of the deal of Black Mirrors is the content itself, but it works best in that format.
I wonder, because I think that with Black Mirror, it can be kind of both. I feel like since there's it's very shocking content, but you get a lot of different stories. They vary wildly. So like I could see maybe anthology style works moving from one feature film that's 3 or more shorts to something that's more like a TV series. So we think of like Black Mirror or the other stuff that's on Netflix. They're not really TV series. They're really kind of like OVAs, like we think of them in anime terms. Like they all drop at the same time. They're all sort of independent. They're not really TV series because they're never on TV. So I could see getting more anthology stuff as individual quote unquote episodes.
And binge culture plays into that as well too.
Yeah. So there's a neat mini documentary on the new Robot Carnival Blu-ray that had an interview with one of the guys that worked for Streamline Pictures back in the day whenever Robot Carnival first came over. And he said that one of their major problems with that, but they ended up succeeding with it pretty well, is that they didn't really know how to market Robot Carnival, because like anthologies can kind of be difficult to really sell to people unless they are really into the idea of just like anime as an art form, because you can't really sell memories as a whole, like based on like any particular like characters or story or anything like that. And if you watch the trailer, they sort of go for the idea of like, this is like a celebration of the greatest talents in anime and stuff like that, sort of in a very similar way that they did with Robot Carnival. But it's like kind of how we've been saying earlier, like it's a little bit of a harder sell because there's not like a narrative hook. You can't say like, oh, this is a movie about a magical castle that walks through the land, and there's a mysterious wizard and a girl that gets turned into an old lady.
Thank you for that.
So you're welcome.
Well, thinking about it, another anthology movie I can think of, it's a little older and Western, but like The Four Rooms, which was like an anthology series that was made by Quentin Tarantino back in the day, where it was him and Robert Rodriguez and I think 2 other well-known names, but I'm blanking on them. And the way they marketed it is it's Quentin Tarantino, and it's marketing the names behind the anthology, because I think that's the problem is with an anthology show or movie, you have to market the name behind it. And it's harder with anime because unless you're a Miyazaki, sadly the names kind of blend all together for the general public.
Yeah.
And there's no way to explain, you actually might have said this a little bit earlier, and I'm sorry if I glossed over that, but not you specifically, just in general in the conversation, but there's no way to explain anthologies without like giving away the whole episode, where it's like, you know what I mean, like as a movie it's, you can be like, like Austin was saying, this is about a wizard and a moving castle, but with the anthology you're like, okay, you have to kind of explain the whole minisode to get people to watch it, because if somebody recommends an anthology, like you said, unless there's already a name or several names behind it that I recognize, I'm gonna probably go in kind of like already expecting something not so good.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of this, like, they, in the marketing for this movie, they seem to really want to tie it to Otomo, and that's very understandable because he's obviously the executive producer of this. He directed a third of it, and he is very well known for Akira. So
which
I think
which at the time was probably the most successful anime movie in the West.
But at the same time, it's like I kind of hate that though, because it's almost to me like discrediting the other creators who have worked just as hard to put out something. It's like the whole thing being like, whenever somebody talks about Studio Ghibli or like anime movies in general, and they're like Miyazaki, and I'm like, there are other people who have released things that are, brilliant as well that aren't Miyazaki, and there's more people in Studio Ghibli that aren't Miyazaki. And
no, I'm pretty sure Studio Ghibli is just a shed in Miyazaki's backyard where he makes every movie by himself.
Right, absolutely. That would not surprise me one bit. But I just
apparently he is that like what's the word? Not egocentric, but egomaniacal. Maybe.
I believe it 100%. I just I don't know, that's kind of a little bit of a peeve of mine where it's like, we should, I know when you watch a lot of content, usually you go in like really jaded a lot of the time because you're like, well, I've seen this done before, this has been done before, and I wish we didn't rely so much on the clout of the name and just would go into things like a little bit more open-minded and a little bit more expectant of a good time. And I feel super hypocritical for saying that, but like, you know what I mean when I say that though.
I totally hear you on that, and I generally agree, and that's how like I personally try and approach things like this. Like I like if there's something made by someone that I like, it's like obviously I'm going to gravitate to that,
of course,
but I'm also going to watch things by people who I don't know. But it's just like from a marketing perspective, that's just a really tough sell because you're having to spend like X number of potentially thousands of dollars to market something, and you got to make sure that you do it in a way that like gets more people than just people like us to watch your thing.
I think it's a little easier now with anime just being so widespread. I mean, you could find anything any of these creatives have worked on, that would be in the marketing material, even if it's Morimoto working, for Studio 4C, the studio that brought you Mind Game and the Animatrix, or whether it's, Okamura, who was on Wings of Oniamis, or that Ava show that no one remembers anymore. It's I could see back then with Otomo being so, with AKIRA being in everybody's mind, I could definitely see them pushing his name at the forefront of everything. Much less because it's his original stories. It's I think now if we were to get like a memory style thing now, I think it would be easier just for everybody's sort of in the anime now. It's really easy just to look at a preview on YouTube and get a trailer on YouTube before you go and watch the movie, thanks to Funimation bringing it over. People talking about it on the internet. It's a lot easier to just find something new.
That's very true.
I think we're sort of seeing that because, I mean, we've got kind of a modern example of that because the Flavors of Youth anthology is up on Netflix, and I haven't seen a whole bunch of people sort of really talk about that, but I have seen some, and that's like a Studio Comics Wave anthology series, so they sort of brand it that way. It's just like from the producers of Your Name comes Flavors of Youth.
That's what I was what, I don't know if it was that movie or if it was another movie, and they were like really, really, really reaching to connect to like a big name or big studio, and it was like somebody like real, 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 real low on the docket that worked for a big company or on like a big production, but they wanted to tie that name or production to it. Might have been that movie.
I think it was Fireworks.
Yeah, so I was
it was
thinking,
Fireworks. You're right. It
Yeah.
was Fireworks.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
like
and
fireworks from the producers of Your Name.
From one of the producers of Your Name.
from the art colorist
Yeah.
who worked on Your Name.
You know, it's so funny because, like, if you look at old Central Park Media or, like, US Manga Core DVDs, like, they literally did that. They would be like, from the key animator of Project A-ko comes this
That's
terrible
wild.
OVA that they paid, like, $30 for and
Or,
put it out on
like,
DVD.
When for like Heat Guy J, like I think
Oh, man.
I think it was Genion at the time, where from the character designer of Trigun comes
Oh,
Heat
man.
Guy J. So, but again, that just from what we've been saying, it's a marketing thing where, and I think also just because there's so much content out there, is by pushing a name that makes people go, I know that, I can trust that.
Yeah.
So they're
That's
more
not
likely
always
to
the
go.
case.
That's not always the case. Like fireworks. So
Right. So Otomo said that one of the goals that he wanted for this particular project, in contrast to AKIRA, he thought that AKIRA was like way too much of himself personally as a creator, because he did like AKIRA really is his movie. Like, it's his idea, it's his characters. He did a ton of work on that movie, and he said that like he wanted to do something very different with this project, so sort of like step back a little bit and let other creators flourish so that they could have this sort of shared perspective sort of things, like synergy sort of things on this project. And honestly, it's my personal assumption that had AKIRA, and so we sort of talked about this earlier, but like had AKIRA not been such a huge success internationally and Otomo being sort of like the director of it, I honestly don't think that Memories would have really been able to have been made at all, because like we've said earlier, like anthology movies tend to not do so well in Japan, and that was definitely the case for Robot Carnival. Like, Robot Carnival really got its fandom here in the US. Like, it came out in Japan and everybody was just like, whatever. And then it came out here like during the VHS era, and it like got shared on like fan sub tapes, and then it eventually got onto like legit like release, and it was on VHS, DVD, everything, and it was just very, very beloved and very shared here. But I'm sure that the investors behind Memories were probably a little bit more confident that since it was Katsuhiro Otomo doing this and adapting his own stories, still relatively soon after AKIRA, which was a big international hit, that's probably why they were sort of more confident in funding this particular project, even if it's something that wouldn't really, typically based on the data and history, sell very well. So it is interesting to look at Memories sort of in the context of its peers in anime around the same time, especially related to the people that worked on it. So it has a large amount of shared staff and a general sort of sci-fi-ish tone of things like Macross Plus and Cowboy Bebop. But Memories as a piece of work, as like a piece of anime, obviously never really got to the same like level of popularity or pervasiveness as things like Macross Plus and Cowboy Bebop. So I think the reason for that is probably a multitude of different reasons. I think one maybe major factor is the fact that Memories, while it came out in 1995, it was actually not released in the United States at all until 2004, and it was on DVD, so like it completely missed out on like the fan sub, like tape trading sort of culture that sort of brought Robot Carnival into popularity, and it sort of missed the height of like Macross Plus and the initial like hype of Cowboy Bebop and things like that by being like a whole 6 years after Bebop came out. It also might be contributory that like even Robot Carnival had an English dub, so obviously things that are dubbed sort of get more exposure because they're just available to be viewed by people who are not up for watching things in a foreign language. And back at that time, there was definitely a lot more people that were not willing to do that. And while Robot Carnival is very visual, like there's some shorts that don't have any speaking at all. Like Memories is very dialogue heavy, so that's I think with
Robot Carnival specifically, that also aired on Sci-Fi Channel.
That's very true.
So a lot of people just saw that because that's the only anime that really easy accessible.
Right.
I think the other thing too is probably just the timing was really bad because at the time during the VHS days, a lot of the stuff that was released was a bit older, so it was probably much cheaper or more easily able to get licensed, whereas Memories at the time was still relatively new, so it was probably more expensive. And also because of the names, that probably raised the price up for people to put it out. And as for the whole dub versus sub thing, even back in the VHS days and the old first bubble, the wave of the first bubble, there was always people who were okay with subs. So I don't think it was really a sub versus dub thing. I think it was just who released it, which is what killed or kind of lack thereof of awareness of Memories, because I think Sony put this out back in the
I hear what you're saying on that. There definitely was that community of people that would just straight up watch like Raws and they didn't care. But I'm saying that like in comparison to things that were just like mega hits like Macross Plus and Cowboy Bebop, and Memories being like somewhat similar, at least in staff and like general feel, like it didn't get anywhere close to that stuff.
Well, and I think also because it wasn't released through the traditional anime channels of at the time, ADV, Geneon, Funimation. So, and as we know through anime fandom, all those companies are so well plugged into the fandom and to get the word out. Whereas Sony, a big corporation that's kind of doesn't have that personal connection with the fandom, probably had a harder time pushing it, and that's why I think it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So, like, I didn't hear about this movie until you told me about it, Austin.
Oh, really? Wow.
Same, yeah.
So I think I had not realized until you mentioned that this movie was not released over here in 2004. That just didn't really cross my mind, and I think that really, I guess, when I think about it, it really holds the entire key to that mystery there. When we think about Otomo, like it's all centered around AKIRA, and you know, I've heard his name since I've seen AKIRA, but I never really looked into his stuff the same way that I looked into a lot of other directors. And looking at it now, Otomo's not really an anime director, really, apart from these films and Short Piece. Like he's a manga artist primarily first, and screenplay and that. So his anime work is so far and few between that by 2004, AKIRA was already there was a big push in the late 80s, early 90s for AKIRA that was everywhere, and that by that point it kind of died down. And then I think it was Steam Boy came out in 2004, 2005.
Yep.
And that didn't really hit the same fervor that they were really expecting with AKIRA. So to have this anthology film, which it by that point it was almost 10 years old. It looks like it was almost 10 years old at that point. It definitely looks like something from the mid 90s, which I think there was kind of a general reaction that I think in the general public to kind of push more toward modern looking stuff. Yeah, what we now know is that really crappy, CG paint,
Digipaint
kind of stuff. Yeah, Digipaint. There you go. I think it's definitely held up more than they were expecting it would. But yeah, this kind of just came out of nowhere with a name that by this point only some of the old guard really recognized Otomo's name. It really wasn't on anybody's radar, and yeah, I think that sort of explains why Memories hasn't really hit that critical appeal that we would expect.
Yeah. And if you think back to 2004, what sort of shows were coming out then? That was sort of the rise of the early rise of the moe slice of life stuff, and
over here it was Full Metal Alchemist was the big deal in 2004.
Full Metal,
that Toonami era. Inuyasha
Yeah. So it's really sort of after that wave of like sci-fi anime being like
Yeah.
just like the anime. Like if you were watching anime in like the early 90s or the 80s, it's like if the anime you were watching was probably like 9 times out of 10 going to be something sci-fi-ish, but by the 2000s or so it was more like fantasy or comedy, slice of life, something like that. All right, so I guess you sort of already talked about it, but so how did you all first figure out about Memories, or am I sort of the ringleader of you band of rats here?
Well, yes, always, but
For me, just like how I dragged everyone on the Lupin the Third train, I think you are the one that told me about Memories in the first place and told me how it's a really good anthology movie. You should check it out. And I think it was a similar thing with me introducing people to Lupin.
Hopefully so, and everybody seems to dig Lupin, so it seems like you guys dug this movie. So I'm proud to have been a part of that.
Lupin with Lupin.
Lupin the Third.
I think I was over at your house, and you were just like, "Hey, this is weird. You'll like it." It showed me Magnetic Rose, and that was it.
Yep. I think I want to say that there was something that you had seen relatively recently to that time, and I was like, oh, that reminds me of Magnetic Rose. I should show you this. Maybe it was Black Mirror.
Maybe.
Or something like that. But anyway, so I guess that the way... Yeah, go ahead, Tobias.
Yeah, as for myself, I saw an AMV for Magnetic Rose, I would say 2004 or somewhere like 2006, like that era. And it was pretty much the entirety of Magnetic Rose set to some operatic song. So I pretty much got the entire story just through that one music video, and kind of just sat in the back of my mind for the past 10 or so years. I bought a copy of the DVD copy, and it's been sitting on my shelf. I want to say like 5 years or so. Either AWO or Ancast did a review of it.
Oh, really?
So that was my only other experience with this until now, actually sitting down and actually absorbing it.
So I guess for me, since I sort of brought it to Tori and Bill, the way that I found out about it was through Amazon.com.
They're good for something, I guess.
Yeah. So I want to say this was like circa 2010 or 11 or so, whenever I was still in high school. And back then it was like, yeah, sorry. I was trying to get more into anime in general. Like I had watched Gurren Lagann in my early high school and was like super into that, and like my whole friend group at the time, like most of very similar to right now, our entire friend group revolved around comic books, anime, and video games. So I was thinking, well, I want to get into some more anime, so I'm gonna sort of delve deep into some classics maybe. So I went on Amazon and I bought myself some DVD copies of Paprika, Tekkon Concrete, the Cowboy Bebop movie, Ghost in the Shell, and Memories.
Not a bad collection.
No, it's really not. And the reason that I gravitated to those in particular is because they were like super cheap. They were like, each one of them was like less than $10. And that is one great thing about a lot of those Sony anime is that well, for a time they were pretty cheap to get a hold of. Memories maybe not so much now. It's not technically out of print, but it's a little bit expensive for a DVD.
Yeah, I think the cheapest ones in that collection are probably like the Bebop movie, Paprika, and Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, definitely. So I had picked up Memories shortly after I'd watched AKIRA for the first time, and I watched Magnetic Rose and was just blown away by it. And then I sat it on my shelf and didn't watch the other two until like 4 years later. And for no good reason, really. I watched like Magnetic Rose like 3 times, but for some reason I just like couldn't get into Stink Bomb. Not that I wasn't interested in it, I was just like, I love Magnetic Rose so much, and at the time, like in high school, I was super into things of that style, just like weird melancholic things, like borderline creepy things like that. Like I was super into BioShock and things like that. So that's sort of the tone that I was looking for stuff in, sort of that more hard, dramatic sci-fi sort of thing. So I like Cannon Fodder and Stink Bomb didn't really offer that for me at the time, but I did watch Magnetic Rose a bunch of times, and then I still have my DVD copy, and here it is. It sits, and then told Bill about it in college, and then he eventually got a copy, and now we're here. All right, so you guys want to actually talk about what's in this movie rather than about it or how we got it?
Yes.
Probably a good idea. People are here for us to review anime. Heck yeah, let's talk about this stuff.
The Bill.
Okay. So Magnetic Rose opens up where we're in space, and the crux of the short is a crew of basically space garbage collectors. They're about to finish their shift when they come upon the Magnetic Rose when they get a distress signal, and they're wondering, like, is this a person? What's going on? Maybe it's the signal's malfunctioning. Let's go figure it out. And two of the crew members go on to, I think the name of the ship is the Magnetic Rose, where they're exploring it, and they're seeing that it's this grand ship that was for this famous opera singer back a few centuries back, and it's like it's frozen in time. Like, it's very pristine, like nothing has changed. But as they slowly go further and further into the ship, strange things start to occur where they're starting to see the ghost-like figures, and it's got a really kind of scary kind of not a horror but a thriller type psychological thriller vibe going to it. And as the short goes on, you see just the progression of of kind of psychological madness that happens to the crew members as they go further and further into the Magnetic Rose.
Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of like it's like the anime version of, like, if you combine 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining.
Yeah.
I would agree with the Shining parallels. That's actually right on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Because kind of like if you've seen The Shining, where Jack Nicholson slowly starts to lose his mind and begins to feel that the ghosts are real, like the bartender in The Shining and the people in the hotel that are not his family. It's kind of similar to the two crew members that go on where they start to believe that who's the name of the singer?
Ava.
Ava is a real person, and that she's just watching them, and that she is leading them to a better life.
Mm-hmm.
You would think by now that people would know better than to answer distress calls from ships in space, but what do I know?
Yeah, those guys didn't watch any of those movies.
Yeah, well, we got Alien, Dead Space, what else? I don't know, but...
Yeah, or at the very least, as soon as things get a little weird, just kind of nope out of there. But like they show up and it's like this huge mansion. There's like a holo projection that shows like this, nice outdoor scene. There's like food everywhere. Like, all right, this is too weird. We're getting the hell out.
It's a bunch of macho men. Do you expect them to like chicken out at the last minute?
Bill, you mentioned ghosts a couple of times, and I think that's another one of the interesting ideas that this puts forward in this particular short is like so a lot of people theorize about ghosts that like ghosts are sort of like projections or leftovers of like particularly strong memories attached to a specific place, and I think that sort of fits the bill completely with this, but they also take it to a different level about it, like that the ghostliness of it is also tied to like the spaceship's AI system.
Mm-hmm.
So like basically the ship has sort of saved Ava and her entire life and all of her memories, and is sort of like playing them on repeat even after she's been, dead for, who knows how long. And I think it brings up the interesting theme of like the like the crossover between like our digital selves and our like real self, because like in a way whenever you like record your voice or like a video of yourself, like in a way that is like a snapshot of a memory of yourself, but it is also not you. It's just like a projection of you.
Actually, kind of tying it back to our Black Mirror discussion that we kind of briefly had, there's a Black Mirror episode, I think one of the Christmas specials, where you see this person with it's like, it creates their own AI, and you see the person within the machine goes like, wait,
oh yeah,
but, that's me. And it's like, no, you're just the memories of that person, where your job is to manage that person's life. And she's like, but no, I remember it all so clearly. And it's just that blending of like, well, what's reality and what's technology, and as technology gets further and better and better and better, the line between what's a physical reality between what's just a technology man-made thing it gets blurred. Well, one other thing I really like about Magnetic Rose is just I love the ship design. Like as you go in, you see it's darkly lit, but it's all these grand Baroque, very classical architecture. It's throughout the house.
Yeah,
and
it's very beautiful.
It's very pretty to look at, and just the ever-present feeling of just how well preserved the time period is, of just like nothing has changed. It's kind of like this is a weird comparison, but my favorite ride at Disneyland and all the Disney parks is Tower of Terror, because of just the aesthetic of just like, it's the 1930s and nothing has been touched. Everything's the same. You still see the old 1930s luggage, and you see the architecture, and you see just the clothing. It's just nothing's been touched, and I think the eeriness of that is just kind of appealing, and just what's going on here.
It commits to the aesthetic.
Yeah. And I think that does kind of juxtapose later. We mentioned 2001 and The Shining, but I think when we get to the internal bowels of the ship, it really invokes Alien. I think when we get to the main part there, like, it reminded me a lot of the ship design from that original movie when they get to the I think like the original space jockey ship. It just that huge cavernous like internals there with this Geiger-esque like organic aspect combined with the mechanical. That entire segment down there just made me think of Alien.
I would venture to say, like, just from a purely animation and like design standpoint, this is probably one of the best looking and best animated pieces of anime ever. Like, it's just fantastic. Like, everything looks so good. It's on par with like something like Beauty and the Beast.
And the amount
of
the amount of detail that's in every single shot. Like, you can see each individual pieces of food that's on the table, or the individual ruffles of the dresses when they go into her clothing, when they go into Ava's closet. Just incredible work.
Yeah, it's so visually stunning.
Not only in terms of the aesthetic, the general aesthetic that we talked about, but also the flow of the animation quality. I feel like is certainly theatrical quality all throughout. It definitely reminded me of the same sort of I don't know, like the animation styling that you would see in AKIRA. It just everything's really flows really smoothly. Everything just looks really, really nice.
And they even hired Rutger Hauer to play the main character.
He's the only live action character in anime.
He looks exactly like he does in Blade Runner. I think one thing that's interesting to look at in terms of like the story and the narrative of this is that in the documentary they talked about how like Heinz, the main character, Rutger Hauer looking dude, he didn't really have much of a character in like Otomo's original version. So what Morimoto and Satoshi Kon did is they really fleshed out that whole subplot with him and his daughter, like his sort of his anxieties and fears of like being away from his family, and sort of the ship's AI sort of like making him like hallucinate these memories of his family, and sort of expanding on that, and seeing like the horror of him like trying to reach for his daughter, but she's just like an AI projection robot thing, and it's really eerie.
And also the AI preying on what the two crew members really want, where
Yeah.
The Rutger Hauer looking dude wanting to be really close to his family, while the other guy is just kind of really just is attracted to women and being seduced.
He's horny
by
on
Ava.
Maine.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate?
No.
He's seduced by Ava's beauty, and you see that he basically loses all senses of reality, where it's him in the garden with Ava, just like, I will never leave you. And he's in the kind of classical, kind of something you'd see out of like Amadeus classical clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think between the two, I really enjoyed Heinz's story more than Miguel's. I thought Miguel was a little too generic, too cliche, too kind of obvious for this ghost story. Mm-hmm. But I really enjoyed with Heinz's story how we got snippets of it throughout, up until we see like the scenes at the end with the whole flashback being played. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
It might be me reading too deep, but like I think it's kind of a good contrast though, because you have a character who's very much like giving in to every whim and is like, I'm just gonna go along with this because like what else? Like I possibly can't come into any harm from this, but you know. And then we've got the other character who's like, okay, this isn't right, and why is this going on? And I'm gonna try to fight back and things like that. So.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a good foil to have like both of those characters in there, because you got Miguel, who's like the younger one, and he's like very devil may care. It's like he doesn't really appear to have very many responsibilities, and then you got Heinz, who's got this family back home that he's always thinking about, and you know his responsibilities there, and sort of the AI sort of preys on each of their individual weaknesses in that way. It's like, I mean, I don't personally think it's a weakness, but it could be something that could be used against someone. Like Heinz is like, the thing that he cares about the most is like his family. So obviously the AI would like target him using his daughter and stuff like that. And with Miguel, it's more of just like his immaturity, I guess, and taking advantage of that. It's some pretty sinister stuff. Like it's pretty wild in that way.
I feel like most people too would just like give in to be able to live in a perfect idealized computer simulation. I can't say I wouldn't not do that. So it's interesting to see that play out on both aspects.
I really like the kind of the seductive web that the story goes on. It kind of gives the characters where they're slowly brought into the Rose through the distress signal, which traps them in, and as they get further and further, they get further and further stuck into the web, which the magnetic rose wants them to stay in and never leave.
I mean, I think it's one of those. I just think in general, I would agree. This is probably definitely the strongest of the three films. I don't think anyone can really argue that, if we're being honest. This is definitely the reason to watch Memories, if nothing else. Not to say you shouldn't watch the other ones, but this is certainly something that should not be missed. Of course, this is the screenplay by Satoshi Kon himself, and I think this is kind of one of his earliest works in anime.
Yeah, it was pre-Perfect Blue.
So kind of to see like that early influence here before Perfect Blue, back when he was still just writing and doing manga, before all that. Definitely a little bit of his early DNA present here, I think, with the focus on the characters specifically. We mentioned, the way Heinz and Miguel sort of play off each other in different aspects. the entire creepy mysteriousness of both Ava and the ship itself, something that we would see, of course, later in Perfect Blue. Very, very similar psychological thriller tone, while still being very, very much very sci-fi based. That we'll see, sort of contrasting here with Kon's penchant for this psychological thriller. He's focusing on these characters and the fear that they're going through, just like in Perfect Blue, with very much this I guess early anime sort of focus on science fiction stories. Specifically, we would see, sure, Kon's films all sort of deal with sci-fi to some degree. I feel like they're really more interpersonal than they are here specifically. We have, of course, the huge ship, the Magnetic Rose itself, and the story set up in set in these sci-fi trappings, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the Magnetic Rose is just a good example of Kon's early attempts to do what he did throughout his entire career, which is sort of take the fantastical, take sci-fi, fantasy, techno horror, and sort of make it very personal. And there was one interesting little piece of the plot that I noticed that Satoshi Kon undoubtedly recycled in Perfect Blue as part of one of the main ideas of the whole thing is they said a line whenever they were talking about Ava's story, what happened to her and who she was and all that apparently her husband was tragically killed by one of her rabid fans because they were jealous that she was married to someone.
Love idol culture.
Yeah, it's what does that sound like? That sounds a lot like sort of the idea of Perfect Blue. And I really do think that having not read the original manga but knowing what he contributed to Magnetic Rose, I undoubtedly see this as part of the Satoshi Kon canon. So if you're somebody that's looking to watch all of his stuff, I don't think that you should discount Memories, even if it was not directed by him. It is still very, very much a Satoshi Kon work.
For sure. And I think another thing that works with this is, since these are all compilation movies, Magnetic Rose is only about 45 minutes long, so it's not a full feature length, so you're not sitting down and digging into a full story like Perfect Blue or Paprika or anything like that. I think Millennium Actress is something like 2 hours.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's a little bit on the longer side, but this is it's a very compact story. You get a lot of it. You get these characters and this one little story of their journey, and you get a lot of you get to see these characters and what am I trying to say? You get really good characterization with Heinz and Miguel and even Ava, but that doesn't take too long to watch, and I really enjoyed all of these movies because of that.
And I think that's one strength of the anthology format is you have a limited amount of time, so your story has to have a central idea or a central theme. You have to get to it. You have to give strong characterization because you don't have time to do a slow build-up of who the characters are like you would in a traditional movie or TV show. So, and I think that's the great thing about short stories is it shows that just a simple idea can create a great piece of work like Magnetic Rose, because what Magnetic Rose basically is just a horror, not a horror. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. It's basically like a siren song trying to bring people in, and with a twinge of the blending of what's reality and what is technology, and with those two simple ideas or two themes, you create a great story like Magnetic Rose.
All right, so I guess that's kind of it's kind of a good stopping point when it comes to Magnetic Rose, even though there's probably a lot more that we could talk about. We didn't even talk about the music at all, which is fabulous, but yeah, the soundtrack is just stellar. But anyway, I think we'll move on to the second short, which would be Stink Bomb. Tori, would you do the honors of telling us what Stink Bomb is about?
Yeah, so it is it's the funny short in the anthology, basically. We have our little office worker, salary man. It's never really stated exactly, but his name is Tanaka, and he ends up getting sick, and like all of us should, he's getting maybe a flu shot. I don't know.
Vaccinate your kids.
Basically, this is a pro-vax podcast.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But he is still feeling kind of down, and he goes into work, and he happens to find this bottle of pills, and then it just all goes to heck, and it ends up basically turning into the episode of SpongeBob where he makes the sundae and it's rotten, and he has really bad breath, and he scares everybody away. Yeah, so that's Stink Bomb.
It would be like that if SpongeBob ended up involving the JSSDF and the American military.
Yeah, of course.
Because he was so stinky.
You mean you haven't seen that episode?
Oh, no, I have. Oh, yeah, that is what happens in that episode. Yeah, obviously.
But you made an interesting point about a cool little weird thing that I have knowledge about, so I'm gonna drop that knowledge bomb. Doing some digging, apparently it is legitimate that this short is based on Gloria Ramirez and the weird stuff that happened to her back in the 90s. And if you are into weird things like this, like I am, it's not really so much a like conspiracy as it is like just a really unfortunate thing when you start to learn more about it and kind of like figure out what might have actually really happened. But anyway, so we have this lady, Gloria Ramirez, and she is suffering from cancer, and she ended up in an emergency room. She was having like irregular heartbeats and like irregular breathing and things like that, so they basically sedated her, and they had to like jumpstart her heart basically. And
like this is where I play a clip of that Motley Crue song.
Yeah. But they noticed all these nurses that were like around and working on her, they started to see this like weird oil coming out of her body, and obviously that's not normal in the excess that they were seeing it. And they started to notice this like weird smell coming from her mouth, and that could have been like an indicator of a lot of things, like if you're malnourished and you're not getting enough like carbs in your diet, like your breath will start to smell like acetone. Fun fact of the day. But this was something different going on with her. They tried to take blood to do like blood samples, and there was ammonia and like weird colored particles in her blood, which obviously, like, one, you shouldn't smell like ammonia, and two, you shouldn't have things in your blood. All the nurses that were around her, they either fainted or became super nauseated, lightheaded, things like that. A bunch of them ended up having to go into the ICU themselves because they were so ill after dealing with this woman. And they tried to resuscitate her for a whole like hour, and she ended up dying. Nobody really knows what was going on, but the general consensus from some scientists who had looked at her body is that she had been injecting herself with, I'm going to absolutely butcher this, dimethyl sulfoxide, which is a very powerful solvent used in like degreasers as a home remedy for pain, which is really wild. It's like I just don't understand, but at the same time, I guess, you know, if you're in that bad of a situation, I guess you're trying anything you possibly can to alleviate yourself of pain. But I just don't think personally I would inject myself with degreaser, but you know, the body and brain will get I'm not living my best life apparently. But you know, in trauma, the body and brain will cause you to do very odd things. So yeah, that's kind of what they're thinking she did. But you know, obviously there's conspiracies that go around that. But I can't believe I'm going to go on record and be like the whole what is it? Where it's like the least likely explanation is probably the explanation. Or not the least likely, the most obvious explanation is most likely the explanation when it comes to weird things like that.
Yep, that tends to be how it goes.
Which, not me. I'm like, oh my gosh, the government's full of lizard people, and, not really.
Let's go on the record and make sure that everybody knows that Tori is not a fan of Alex Jones.
But I do love gay frogs, so...
Don't we
that
all?
means you're definitely not a fan of Alex Jones. But yeah, it's like, so yeah, Stink Bomb was definitely sort of like loosely based on that toxic lady phenomenon, as it was called in the media back then. And it was sort of like this sensationalized sort of urban mystery thing. Just like, this lady was so toxic, she made the nurses sick, and things like that. And that's sort of what they're playing on there. But I think Stink Bomb takes it to, like, the next level by making it sort of a commentary on, like, militarism.
And biological warfare.
And biological warfare, because that's essentially the whole reason why Tanaka becomes, like, the toxic man, is because he takes this pill, like you said, that ends up being like part of this government experiment in biological warfare, and like it makes him so not necessarily stinky, but it makes him emit this like weird smoke from his sweat that like is toxic and kills everyone around him except for him. And that would sound pretty like horrifying, but the short is definitely taking the dark comedy route with this. And it again is just kind of funny to see this like very mild-mannered, sort of frazzled salaryman like murdering all these people unintentionally while his grandma tries to get him to go back.
I know. That cracked me up when he's just like, is he on his bike? And he looks up and he sees the helicopter and it's his grandma. Like, go back to the countryside. I don't know why. Just go.
So, I know Bill has thoughts about Stink Bomb, so I'll go to Tobias first. Actually, I'll go to Tori first. So, how did you like Stink Bomb?
I found it really funny. I thought it was a good kind of like thing to come off of Magnetic Rose, because you're like, oh, like, my brain is so amped up, now I need to laugh. But I enjoyed it. I think it is definitely my second favorite, which is kind of weird to say because there's only 3 shorts in the anthology, but it's funny. It has a lot to say about the military and, the things that they do sometimes that are really crazy and wild, like biological warfare. And I think I told you the other day that I would love to see Junji Ito do a reimagining of this. Because it's body horror and, like, black humor, and those are two things that he meshes together very well. And when you're not laughing, you remember that this is actually kind of very sinister.
Yeah, it is.
Because, he's killing people, whether he means to or not. And, this whole pill or whatever was made to potentially, kill even more people. But, we forget about that because, haha, funny moments. But I liked it. And that little, whenever he's biking, that little, like, boppy, poppy song that plays, that kind of like, you can do it, is really great.
Yeah, I think what really sells the dark comedy of this whole thing is like the soundtrack is really like goofy. Like it's like I can just hear it in my mind. It's like this really like poppy, like sort of silly, like it sounds like something that like Weird Al Yankovic would like come out on stage dancing to or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's not a very, I guess that makes sense. It's not a polka, unfortunately, but, and I would echo you and Tori and say, like, I also really liked Stink Bomb, and I thought it was very funny. But how did you like it, Tobias?
I definitely enjoyed it. I kind of, going into this, already hearing some reviews from earlier, I kind of knew that this and Cannon Fodder weren't going to be nearly as good as Magnetic Rose. I wasn't expecting them to really be. But I didn't hate it. I do think it's the weakest, but again, these are all really great films, so even third place is still going to be really, really good. I really enjoyed the comedy. I really enjoyed when him waking up and seeing all those bodies everywhere, and the sort of like the whole detritus is just kind of everywhere, and everyone's freaking out, and he has no clue, what's going on. It was a lot of fun. The thing that stood out to me the most, just like Magnetic Rose, I feel like this has some really great like Sakuga moments.
Oh yeah.
Later with he actually develops the entire fog cloud, and that whole final like showdown with the American guys in the Space Marine armor, and they kind of like show and the one showdown in the tunnel, and just like the way they animated the smoke and the vapor and all those like particle effects, it just seemed really kind of a nerdy thing to go into, but I really thought they put a lot of effort into that. And watching
also
this,
the scene before that too, like the sequence where he realizes that like, oh, he might be killing the people, but he's making like the plants grow crazy.
Yes.
And like he's just standing outside, like all this beautiful like sakura petals are flying everywhere, and there's beautiful vines and flowers everywhere, and the sky is beautiful in the background. Like that's some really, really stellar environmental animation right there.
Yeah. A lot of good work there. So I'm watching it the entire time, and I'm thinking, like, this makes me think of Otaku no Video or Oniami's, and it really didn't surprise me looking at the sort of the animation credits here. Yeah. But the director here did work on Oniami's and then later Evangelion. It was just I can't put my finger on exactly, but just something about like I don't know the character animation or character design, just the way this goofy main character is, made me think of the main character from Oniami's or even Otaku no Video.
If I haven't looked this up, but it would not surprise me at all if it was the same. Well, no, it wouldn't be, because that would be Sadamoto. He's just not doing his normal style, but like the character designs do look a lot like the characters in Honiami specifically, especially the main character. He kind of looks just like he looks like he would be Shiro's like younger brother or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And like some of the old men in the military also look like some of the old men in Honiami's as well.
I mean, overall, I think my main impression is I think it's kind of a hard. I know Magnetic Rose is a hard act to follow, and I feel like with that shifting tones so wildly, I think that kind of gives people an automatic, I don't know, like a negative outlook going into it. So I think if you were watching separate, like if you go into that separate, realizing that it's more of a comedic thing, I think I would enjoy it more on a second viewing, perhaps. But it's when you're kind of shocked by Magnetic Rose, I found it to be a little a bit jarring transition, I think.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're watching this thing for the first time, I'd say like watch Magnetic Rose and then like pause it and walk away for like an hour or two, and then come back and watch the other two, and sort of treat it like two viewing experiences, because the difference between like Stink Bomb and Cannon Fodder is not nearly as stark as the difference between Magnetic Rose and Stink Bomb.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah. I think another thing that kind of stands out to me now that I think about it is just the pacing didn't feel as tight as Magnetic Rose. So watching the first film, it felt like one episode of an anime TV series. It was over quick. Like everything felt really compact, really tight, and it was over. Really cool story. But I felt like this dragged a little in the middle.
A little bit, yeah.
Between the points where he first murders the news crew that touches down to save him, and to like the last battle, I think it stretches just a little bit too far for my taste. I think that's helped by, again, like really fun animation moments, like when they're shooting missiles at him, and there's this really fun moment where he's trying to like dodge those missiles. But I felt like overall, just as a plot, I kept seeing it as this one journey that's just like, come on, like make it to the destination. Let's figure it out.
I would, I agree with that, but I think that maybe one of the reasons why they sort of dragged it in the middle is to sort of exaggerate the bureaucracy of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
Which, in a way, like, if Magnetic Rose is 2001 and The Shining, then Stink Bomb is the Doctor Strangelove.
And Shin Godzilla.
Yeah, and Shin Godzilla. Because it's all about, like, sort of poking fun at, like, the military-industrial complex and, like, biological warfare and like how the military is just kind of silly sometimes, and they do some things that don't make sense. And like especially with all that infighting between like the American soldiers stationed at the Japanese station and the other Japanese guys, and the characterizations of the Americans is just like, well, we're just gonna go in there at the last minute and blow stuff up. It's like well, yeah, that sounds about par for the course.
America.
Even though there wasn't like a ton of characterization to him, like poor Tanaka, because it's like that struggle of trying to make something better when you're not feeling well or when you're in a bad position, trying to make it better and then ending up making everything like just much worse. Like it just snowballs out of control, and like I'm sympathetic to that. I get it. And I found that so funny.
Like Tanaka really is very much like the everyman. Like he starts out of his day and he's just like not super hyped to be at work. He's kind of sick.
Yeah,
and then he gets Go ahead.
I was going to say, Tanaka is the equivalent of Smith, basically, too, so...
Smith?
The last name.
Oh, okay, so, like, John Smith.
Yeah.
John Tanaka.
So, yeah, a lot of people prescribe to the idea of, like, the main character in some stories being, like, the blank slate that you're supposed to project yourself onto, and, like, a lot of the times that just doesn't work. See Sword Art Online. But, like, I think that, like, Tanaka in that is very much... He's very relatable. Like, I think everybody has been in a situation that he's been in before. I think he is.
I've taken biological warfare drugs and have also killed hundreds of people. I don't know what life you're living.
He's an idiot. He's an...
Yes, Bill, I'm also an idiot. What are you trying to say?
I think
under duress, we don't always make the best decisions.
True, but hearing your points.
Okay.
I have no qualms with the animation. I think the animation in this is really good, especially during that sequence in the tunnel when all the missiles are fired directly at him, which I will admit is pretty funny. Though it is kind of funny / stupid of like, really? The military is like the A-team, or like someone playing a shooter where they get like a 30% hit range. Like it's kind of fun. And I think the problem I had with it was just like Tobias was saying, was the tonal shift was a bit jarring for me. And also there was just some logic problems that I just could not let go. And I know I should have let them go, but I couldn't. Like, okay, if he works, they basically say in the beginning he knows he works in a research lab. Why would the head of a major research lab, where he knows that he's working on a major project, would keep such a dangerous piece of scientific technology that he has produced on his desk? I couldn't... that thing, just like, that made no sense to me. Two, if he's somehow bonded with the stink bomb, then the air will carry the stink across not just Japan, but kill the world, because he is outside. He basically has killed the world by going outside by doing that. Three,
I mean,
if he's so dangerous that we need to stop him, instead of sending military force to kill him, or trying to send someone that to tell him what's going on because they immediately die, they could easily just at a higher elevation do what a lot of the military did during major wars and just shoot down a bunch of pamphlets directed specifically towards him that say, this is the situation.
They did. It was called His Grandma.
No, that was a copy over the speakerphone. Whereas
So Bill, what essentially you've done in this conversation is you have walked up to us and put salt and pepper on our ice cream cone.
Yes, I am the horrible condiment that no one likes, and put it on a wonderful ice cream sundae. Because just I couldn't get past the logic parts of this thing, and the comedy and the commentary on the military just kind of, I feel, gets a little bit lost for me. Like the only thing that kind of stuck with me is like, even though he's causing all this death, the U.S. military guy is like, well, we need to preserve it, and I
Yeah.
kind of get that as like a joke / military industrial complex bit. I got that, but it just seemed kind of lost on me because they're so trying so hard to be funny. Oh, another thing is, how does he get the damn suit on at the end? How does he get that suit on?
He does it through the power of suspension of disbelief.
Because when they go in there, you think the rest of them are all dead, so why would he put on the suit voluntarily? And there was another thing that he did that didn't make sense. Oh, his reaction to people automatically dying, just like, he's kind of whatever about it.
That is very true. He's a little
He's
bit
in
blasé
shock.
about it.
He's in shock.
No, he's not. Cause it's like he's like, why is everyone running away from me? He's not. Why are people dying immediately when they come up to me?
the ugly.
I think he just annoyed me too because he's pretty much an idiot. I'm gonna say he's actually calling him Mr. Bean would be too much of a nice compliment. He's just an idiot.
I hear your complaints, Bill. You're not necessarily wrong, but I just think this is all about like reading it through the lens of absurdity.
And I think that's the problem is most Japanese comedies are absurd comedies, and for me personally, I don't like absurd stuff. It really
yeah, but I
works
mean,
for me.
I don't know. I see this more as just like an absurdist sort of like
Commentary on the military-industrial complex.
I mean somewhat, but more just like bureaucracy and like the way that they handle like emergencies and some things, and some of that as well. But and not just necessarily Japan, but just like the military in general, because they do talk about that as well. But that so much is not really. So it's definitely a part of it, but I tried to view this in the same way that I viewed something like Doctor Strangelove. It's like it's very absurd, and if you try and apply like too much logic to it, you are obviously not going to enjoy it. Sort of like how you've articulated, because it's supposed to be very over the top and somewhat unbelievable, but still rooted in enough reality that it's like believable within its own like little world that is created.
But I think you're right. But because I came into memories with a clean slate, I didn't look up anything. I didn't know what the shorts were gonna be. So I think what Tobias said earlier, just the jarringness of it, really caught me off guard. And maybe in a different mindset, I probably would have liked this.
I mean, I can see if you're coming into this fresh and you're like, man, Magneto Rose is so great. Like, oh man, it blew me away. What's the next one? And you get a very, very different experience.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I said what I said earlier. It's just like, well, watch Magnetic Rose as sort of its own thing, and then watch the other two like separately.
Do what I should have done. Watch Magnetic Raid first, watch Cannon Fodder second, and watch the worst one, Stink Bomb, last.
Or you could watch Magnetic Rose last, so you don't have that expectation.
That's
true.
also
That's
very
true.
true.
Yeah.
That's
And I
also
think that's sort of I think there are some generalized weaknesses about the whole Memories anthology as a piece of cinema, I guess, as like a piece of work. But it's like the parts of it are so great sort of as pieces on their own, but they're just not, they don't go well together.
Isn't that all anthology movies? Is all anthology movies eventually?
Not necessarily, like, not always, but we can talk a little bit more about that after we finish up talking about Cannon Fodder. So Tobias, would you like to talk about Cannon Fodder?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So Cannon Fodder is basically 4C being the most 4C they've ever 4C'd.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, when you think about like the kind of stuff they were doing, this very like heavily stylized, stuff that just doesn't look like anime when we think of traditional anime styles. This is it. I don't think you could really get more 4C than this, to be fair. So this is very much a departure from the other two films. Both Magneto Rose, like I said, and Stink Bomb are about 45 minutes. This is only about half of that, only about 20 minutes. very, very short comparatively. And unlike those work, there's not really an overarching narrative. It's more
It's
like
a
this
day.
really quick picture. Like it's a day in the life
Yeah.
of this world.
Yeah.
And this world is, I guess, like the most cliche collection of propaganda posters that you may have seen from like World War One and 2. It depicts the city that is just filled to the brim with cannons. Every building has an enormous, ridiculous cannon, and all the people that live in the city form the crews that man these cannons. And like all these people very much sort of labor under this ridiculous industrial like cityscape that they live in, and they all have these very like gloomy gray like this skin, and just everything is just very like depressing and gloomy throughout. So the story here is we have a little boy wakes up in the morning. He gets ready to go to school. He makes a point to stop and salute this huge propaganda-style picture of this what looks to be like a major general, like the perfect image of the modern major general, before heading out to school. And while he's at school, we see his father leave for work, and he's part of one of the cannon loading crews. And we see that whole ridiculous process. It's very inefficient, but I guess as efficient as it could be, considering the size of these rounds that they're loading in the cannon. And it's very much just in the same way that Stink Bomb is this commentary on military bureaucracy. This is very much a commentary on just military everything, military culture as a whole. We see that, like I said, the modern major general, that this really iconic, heroic character that everyone sort of worships. We see him as being this very like rotund, lazy actor that pretty much just does the easiest job as far as the entire process, compared to all these workers that are kind of beat down by the work they have to do day in and day out. We see the little boy grow up in this culture that's really, I think it really makes me think of like a Sisyphean struggle, in the sense that we see these little snippets of the entire progress of the war, where some newscaster gives some information where, we made 3 good hits against the enemy today, but you really have to wonder, is this war ever going to end? And there really is no reason for the society that's built up around this military industrial complex to end. So you kind of see these people trapped in this entire like propaganda life. So yeah, it's very different. The entire, like, the styling of everything, like I said, is very much like a weird 4C deal. Doesn't look like anime, traditional anime style at all, much like Stink Bomb or even Magnetic Rose would be. And very heavily stylized. I can see it not being everyone's favorite just for that reason alone. But even then, it's just because there's not a huge story in the same way that the other shorts have, or most stories would have. It definitely feels a little slower for the most part.
I loved Cannon Fodder because for me, because one, I love the kind of, we go from a more traditional, what we'd expect from anime, to I love the 4C design, and I love just kind of that gray color. Kind of, it made me think of, the reason why they're all gray is because of the soot from the cannon. And that just the really cool transitions from one shot to the next, which I thought where they were basically blending, where there wasn't just a cut where you could obviously see it's a cut. They would just do a transition where it'd be out a window, and then you go to the next scene. And I also liked just the small little mundanity things of the son saying, like, "Mom, can I get this stereo helmet?
Yeah.
All the other kids at the school have it," and it's like, "No,
No, son, we've talked about it. They're dangerous."
Or the mom kind of chit-chatting and doing gossipy rumors at her workplace, or the kid at school just being bored out of his mind, where I didn't view it as kind of kind of a sad sort of 1984. This is a constant military thing. I'm just kind of like, this is their job, and they seem to have a good life where they're just watching TV, eating breakfast, and no one's. Maybe I'm just not getting the subtext, but I kind of just liked the a day in a life perspective of cannon fodder, and just after just the the frustration that I had with Stink Bomb, it was a nice kind of change of pace for me. But I'm talking too much.
That's fine.
I definitely would agree that between the first two works, you're not really sure what you're going to get with the third one, so maybe you're a little more open to whatever it could be.
Yeah, you've been broken. But yeah, I really liked Cannon Fodder a little bit more this time around, because I watched it. Oh, I think I watched it a while ago, and then I didn't really appreciate it so much because I guess I just wasn't really paying attention to it. But just the way that the whole thing moves, and the way that the shots flow into each other, and like the very subtle use of like the CG computer graphics animation is very, very, very carefully orchestrated and very well executed. It really does serve the piece in general, and it sort of shows one thing that I think Otomo is really particularly good at, which is like world building, and especially like not so much world building, but just like world design, because everything is so detailed, so stylized. And if you look at something like AKIRA, like the city, the Neo Tokyo, really does feel like a central character to the movie of AKIRA. Like, I don't think AKIRA would be as iconic if it wasn't so synonymous with just those beautiful cityscapes and the beautiful buildings and just the general feeling of like a world that is lived in. And you get a lot of that same thing in Cannon Fodder as well. It makes me really sort of makes me wish that I wish that Cannon Fodder would have been the movie that he made rather than Steam Boy, because I think that would have been much more interesting, because Steam Boy was not that great.
Yeah, I completely agree. That would have been I would. Well, what would you do with the full like feature length Cannon Fodder though? Like, what story would you tell?
I don't know. I mean, it could sort of be like one of those, not so much reinventing the wheel, but sort of like, people that live in sort of a fascist militarist state, sort of, become woke of their situation and overthrow the tyranny of the incompetent leader. It's like, wow, I'm just sounding like something that I want to happen in real life right now. But, Tori, what did you think about Cannon Fodder?
I didn't like this one very much. Unpopular opinion, I guess. I don't know. War stories are just, like, such a bummer to me. And it's like, we deal with so much of that, like, in real life, that when I look to media, I kind of want to, like, escape that for a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's, stories out there with like these things as a key element that are good and that I enjoy. I just don't know, it didn't grab me here. It's like artistically and animation wise, like you guys were talking about, it's really cool. I love the super stylized character designs where everybody has that kind of like grayish green undercast, and it's probably the soot, but also I was kind of reading it as like, these people are zombies to their lifestyle, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff.
That's a good point.
But it also, to me, read very straightforward as like, stop brainwashing people with war and like propaganda and stuff like that, because the kid at the end, he's like going to bed and he's dreaming of, I'm going to be the super important officer, the man that fires the cannons, and I will never be happy being like on the, minimal level that my father is. I have to be the big important man. And, it's like looking at society, not everybody can be that big important person. Like we have so many roles that I think are just as important as one another. And but yeah, we basically just need to stop like brainwashing people with war and violence and propaganda, because not everybody needs to grow up to shoot cannons and guns.
Right.
But
And like that's like the entire point of this entire world that was set up within the Cannon Fodder universe. It's like they don't do anything other than war, and like that's the
Exactly.
entire reason for like everyone's existence. Like everybody works a war job, everybody does a war thing. It's like
even the little sitcom I think that came on their TV was like about a family fighting war too.
yeah. And they don't even like it's never explained that there's even really a clear threat of any kind or any threat like at all.
Nope.
And it sort of reminded me of like the subplot in 1984 where they're just talking about like how the one country and our country are fighting and we have to build more bombs.
We've destroyed over 100,000 of the enemy. And I think I remember that part in Cannon Fodder 2, where near the end they do a report of the number of people that we have defeated. Sort of similar to in 1984.
Right. But it's like at that point, because of this world, it's like, can you even believe that that's an accurate thing? Or are they just making that up to make them feel like more, enthusiastic about the efforts of the noble country, the war against the evil others?
Yeah,
But,
it's all for sure a smokescreen here, because you've got this entire class of people that all they do is contribute to the war effort. So if there were no war effort, they wouldn't be doing anything. They would be realizing that they're really being kept under wraps by whoever is at the top of the chain, giving them this busy work to do, this wasteful busy work, giving distracted, like you said, at the other. So there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of subtext there as far as what we see in these people. But I don't think a full feature like story that would be interesting. I think it worked because it's a simple day in the life story. Like we're not really supposed to hit a resolution.
Yeah,
you're supposed to think about very much like 1984. You're supposed to think of it like, well, what are we doing now in 2018? Oh God. In 2018.
Yeah, and I usually don't mind stories that kind of throw you into it, and they're just like, this is the way the world works, through like background interactions or things like that. But definitely depends on how it's all executed. And I think a very telling scene in this short was where the ladies, I guess they're like factory workers or something, because they've got on the gloves and the hats, and they're like, it's the scene where they're chanting and throwing their fists up, and the one lady's just like standing there looking really like, I'm not having any of this, and the lady behind her is like really like come on, you gotta do this, like insinuating something bad would have happened to her if the man who walked by saw her not participating. And I think that's a very good like what's the word I'm looking for?
Subtle.
But yeah, a very subtle like look into what might really be going on too.
And I think what's interesting in general is like the dad figure. You can tell that he's got like some significant anxieties about sort of this world that he lives in and the job that he does. Because like you always see him like staring out into space, and then there's that one scene where he like gets all sweaty because he's got to like fire off the cannon or whatever.
Yeah.
It could be from shell shock,
like
actually.
PTSD.
Yeah, it could be from that too. Yeah, but like obviously this whole war lifestyle is like, whether he's conscious of it or not, it's like having a very negative effect on his persona. Like his health and his mood and his mind and all that stuff. And then like he sees his kid like drawing the cartoon about like the little cannon dude, and then it goes into that animation sequence, and it's just like, well, he sort of sees that. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily super evident in the work, but I would think that he would probably see that as sort of like, oh, I don't know if this is necessarily the greatest thing for my kid to be obsessed with, because I know what this sort of stuff does to me and the people that I work with. I don't know if I want that same future for my kid.
Yeah, and you have to think about it too, like children fighting in war is to this day a very, very real problem that we have, unfortunately, in the world.
Definitely. And I think it's important to like Like, I'm not saying that you can't be, if a kid is like fascinated by like military history or you know, just the military in general, it's like that's not necessarily a problem, but I think it's also important to that if we're teaching our kids about war, we have to also teach them that like war is inherently bad.
Hmm.
It is not a good thing. It is not something that should be celebrated. Like war as an institution and as a human activity is not something that we should ever glorify.
Yeah, like this, when I was a World War II nerd growing up, reading about it, just like Eisenhower, one of the greatest military minds of of the 20th century, basically viewed that war should always be a last resort, and that
Hmm.
we should be constantly in constant state of we need to be ready to go fight, and that we should try and look for other solutions.
Exactly, because that there is so much more to life than just like shooting other people and blowing up countries and
No, there's
etc.
not.
Yeah, clearly not.
Violence is the answer.
Yes, fully endorsed.
I guess my little side comment for Cannon Fodder is just I love the design of everything, and I love just the aesthetic of that world. That I would love not a feature, but a manga of
Ooh.
Cannon Fodder. I think that'd be really cool, or a very nice figure that I can buy.
Hmm. So I know that a lot of these were based on manga or short stories that Otomo wrote, and I'm not sure if Cannon Fodder was either. I'm sure it was one of those two.
He looks like he directed this one too.
Yeah, he did.
This is the most Otomo of the works.
It definitely is.
Maybe you guys know more than I. You guys probably know more than I do, but I'm curious. Like besides AKIRA, which of course is in print, what others is his other work in print here in the U.S. U.S.
In terms
North
of
America?
in terms of manga or anime,
Manga.
I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. I know that there was a like an art book that included some of the manga for memories in it that you can still get a
Ooh.
hold of for not necessarily too much money. I've seen it before on eBay, but it's got like production design pieces from all of the shorts and memories, and it has some of Otomo's manga works and maybe some of the short stories in that as well. And I've seen some people on Twitter post about owning it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's just like the memories visual works or something like that.
I'll have to look that up after the show at some point.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, I think that sort of wraps up our general discussion about the three shorts. So we guess we can talk about more this sort of stuff in general. So one thing that we do like to do is that whenever we talk about any particular thing, we like to talk about what we think our either favorite or what the most iconic moment or shot in each particular work is in our minds. So I guess we'll start with Tori. What do you think, in your mind, is the most iconic moment or the most memorable scene or what have you from Magnetic Rose, Stink Bomb, and Cannon Fodder for you?
Magnetic Rose, I think, would definitely be the scene where the main character, the German guy, he sees his like wife and daughter at the table, and then like it all looks like plaster, basically. Like
Yes.
that scene, I thought that was really creepy. Stink Bomb, probably just all the, this is kind of a cop out because like there's so many, I think, for that one particularly, but with all the like smoke and fumes and whatever. But I really loved the scenes where he would like you would see all the foliage in bloom.
Mm-hmm.
Those stuck out to me given the details. And I think with Cannon Fodder, probably the end where you see his little drawing or painting or whatever kind of come to life. Yeah, that's it for me.
What about for you, Tobias?
So I think for me, I was just gonna say the same scene in Magnetic Rose, that and all the different like the organic plaster, like there's some sort of organic matter that just is living and seems to attack our main characters. Very iconic there. Other than that, I would say, geez, we'll go with the. I think the ending was really interesting itself because you pull back, the camera pulls back, and it's like the entire space station is this one large rose. And you see that for the first time. I think with Stink Bomb, there were just a lot of moments, especially near the end, where like the smoke effects were just really well animated, and I really like that. I think the ending, where but I think by that time everyone kind of expected the ending to be what it was, but to see it play out in sort of goofy manner, where he takes the suit off and the smoke clears, and he's really there the whole time. I brought it, you guys. It's here.
Didn't I do such a good job?
Yeah. And with Cannon Fodder, I think that one is specifically where we have this entire segment where they're loading the cannon, and then this like goofy officer just shows up, and he just like goose steps up to the platform and just dramatically like he does like this very anime just pose. As he just like Beyblade lets her up.
Oh, you talking about like when he pulls the cannon rope thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. They used that cut in the trailer.
Yeah, I think that kind of stayed with me. It just kind of like the icing on the cake of just how ridiculous. It's pretty much what that movie is trying to say.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure like his like rotund belly like jiggles in that moment. It's pretty funny. It's very like over the top sort of Baron von Richman sort of stomach.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, what about you, Bill?
I'm okay. I'm gonna go reverse for Cannon Fodder. The scene that sticks out for me the most is when the father had screwed up, and so he's forced to not. He has to stay out in the middle of the cannon, so he's not protected. And so just the fear on his face of just like, oh man, just before it's about to go off. And when it goes off, he and the rest of the crew that are just standing there in the row being wiped away by just kind of like an explosion void that comes over the screen. That's the shot that stuck in my head for that one. For Stink Bomb, my favorite one is just the hundreds and thousands of jets that are in tanks that are in front of our main idiot character, and they drew a massive fire on him when he comes out of the tunnel. And for Rose, probably the one that sticks out to me is when they go into that stinky sewer where you see it's, I kind of view it as the dark kind of underside of the beauty that you first see when you enter the ship, of just that gross muck and just the sort of the ugliness of just, it's like a wasteland that's underneath it, and just them trying just to walk through it and trying to get out of it, I thought was stuck in my mind.
Mm-hmm. For me, I would say my most iconic moment for me, or at least the one that stands out the most for Magnetic Rose, is well, the one that I think of the most whenever I think about Magnetic Rose, just in the multiple times that I've seen it, is the initial reveal of what the inside of the spaceship looks like. Like you've got that sort of extended opening where it's kind of taking its time. They're sort of establishing sort of that these are like space, junk collectors or garbage men or what have you. And then they get the distress, they show up at the spaceship. It's like sort of decrepit on the outside. You don't really know what it looks like too much. We've not seen the big reveal of what it actually looks like until the very, very end. So you just sort of think it's just this rundown sort of spaceship, and like they'll just open it up and there'll be just like who knows what in there. But then whenever Miguel and Heinz sort of open up the doors and they get into the interior, and it just pulls back, and there's that like harp sound effect where you just see this like huge sort of Baroque ballroom that they're in, like on this balcony, and it's just so regal and just like so unexpected. Like, I remember the first time I watched this, I was like, are you serious? Like, that's what my brain did. Like, I was like, is this where this is going? Like, okay, this is really interesting stuff right here. I am very engaged from this point on. Like, the whole short just grabbed me in that very short, like, shot. Like, it instantly told me, okay, so there is this is going to go in directions that I did not expect. And that sort of sets the tone for the whole rest of the thing. For Stink Bomb, just one that is just hilarious to me is just the grandma in the helicopter yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just love that. She's just like, I don't know what's the problem, but they want you to go back. Please don't come into town. And then they have to get pulled away, and that was really funny. He was just like, is that you, Grandma? All the way down from his bike. It was just really silly. And then, again, for Cannon Fodder, very similar to my pick for Magnetic Rose, I would pick, like, the opening sequence up until, like, the first transition, because the first 2 or 3 minutes or so of Cannon Fodder is all, like, one shot. Obviously, it's much easy. Well, I hesitate to say easy because it's not easy, and what do I know? But it's like in like live action film, like so many things go wrong that you really can't do a whole lot of like single take shots like that, because you have to account for so many different things. With animation, you can be a little bit more precise because you sort of get to dictate where the frame is and where the camera goes and all that stuff. But it's still pretty amazing to see like single continuous shots in animation like that, and especially like whenever the little kid like gets up out of his bed and goes to salute the big portrait, and it like pulls back a little bit, and then it continues to pull back as he goes to the kitchen and has breakfast, and then you follow him and his dad as they leave the house, they go down the elevator, they go down the street. I don't know, just that whole sequence is just really, really cool, and it just shows the artistic talent of how that thing was storyboarded, and just the fluidity of it is pretty amazing. Okay, so one more general discussion question about memories as a gigantic whole. So, do you guys think these shorts go together?
Well, they all, to a certain degree, have a common theme of, like, militarism. And I think that is obviously and most easily what ties them together. But I think tonally, not so much, because usually when you see anthology works, at least most of the ones I've watched, tonally, they come together a little bit more cohesively.
I'm kind of in the same agreement with Tori. Just, I think Cannon Fodder and Stink Bomb have an easy connection because they're both kind of commenting on military to some degree, whereas Magnetic Rose seems like it's its own thing. It's kind of like it's Magnetic Rose and other stories.
Yeah.
But they,
to some degree.
They, I don't know if they ever specifically say it, because I kind of, since I had already seen Magnetic Rose, I had kind of, like, sped it up a little bit as I was watching it. But their ship and their gear does look very military, and I know they're supposed to be, like, garbage collectors or whatever, but I wonder if they are working under military. It's just not blatant.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said there for sure. If nothing else, Ava's retreat from society, caused by the assassination of her, like I said, in this case, isn't she killed, or was it her husband?
It was her husband that was murdered.
Okay, I guess there's something to be said there then, with sort of a rejection of this very militaristic, violent society around her retreat into this fortress that she made for herself. Mm-hmm. We said something very similar, I guess.
Personally, I see there's a lot of disconnect here, because I think especially with calling the anthology series Memories, that sort of sets up, well, okay, so they're all going to have something in common that has to do with memories or the past or something like that, and I fail to see that in really anything other than Magnetic Rose.
Yeah.
it's like, well, you could make the argument that sort of that applies to cannon fodder in a way because it harkens back to like sort of World War One, World War Two, sort of Eastern, like, well, not Eastern, but like European sort of Nazi Germany sort of things. So it's got that.
Sorry, I would say more World War One with his helmet.
Well, yeah, with the visuals, but I mean, the principle would still kind of be the same. It's just like the maximum more effort for like what real gain. So I could see that, but with like stink bomb, there's no connective tissue that would work there.
People are always going to remember this stupid researcher guy who killed half of the city. That's the memory.
He killed the world.
He killed the world.
I think going back to cannon fodder, I think the thing there is the lack of memory. It's the fact that no one really remembers why they're fighting, why they're doing this. These characters never tried to engage with that. There is no past for these characters. They wake up, and just like we see them in this day in the life story, and they just go through their day like every day just because they have to.
Mm-hmm. But it's never. I mean, you're definitely right that you could read it that way, but that's never buttoned in. It's never really called out in such explicit terms. Not that they have to like smack you in the face and be like, "This is our theme," but it's never really addressed in that way. Even though you could definitely read it that way. However, Magnetic Rose is like almost like Memories is like essentially the theme of one of many themes of Magnetic Rose.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I don't know. It's like as an anthology, like I genuinely love every single one of these pieces. I think they're all really good in their own ways, like evaluating them against themselves. But as like an anthology collection, Memories is a little bit like, I don't know, it's a little interesting. It's kind of all over the place, I think.
I mean, I think there's one common thread that we haven't really touched on as far as that's concerned.
Let's hear it.
They're all based on manga stories by Katsuhiro Otomo.
Yeah, I know that. We talked about that.
Hey, I gotta my bad joke in here. Come on, I'm allowed one.
They are all the memories of Katsuhiro Otomo.
Yeah,
like all of this is a documentary, and it's just about him and his childhood. All of this,
his weird, wild dreams.
He was Sting Bomb. He killed everybody.
Yeah, he's the bomb.
He's the bomb.
.com.
No. I guess if I'm allowed a bad one, you're allowed a bad one.
Hopefully it's not an E-bomb.
No, it's getting worse. It's getting worse.
All right, I think we
round it up, children.
Let's go to Twitter questions real quick. Our buddy Will comes on asking the real questions. How come I've never heard of this? It sounds right up my alley. Well, we kind of addressed that there in the beginning. It's like this sort of came out a little bit too late beyond like the hype train era for things like this. So it kind of missed the boat in that way. And then it's never been available on streaming. It's only been available on DVD.
Being released by Sony doesn't help.
No, that doesn't help. It's not even up on like Crackle or anything like that. And it doesn't have a Blu-ray release. There's really never been any fanfare about it at all. Like it was re-released maybe a couple of years ago in a Sony anime box set that came with Steam Boy, Memories, Paprika, and I want to say Tekkon Kincrete as well. But it was like just a DVD collection. And the only place I ever saw it was at Walmart, and I only ever saw it for like maybe a few months, and then I guess they discontinued it or something. So it's just not really been available or really pushed. And one thing I do see is like a lot of the general discourse around Satoshi Kon works is they kind of forget about Magnetic Rose. And that's somewhat excusable because he didn't direct it, but like I said earlier, I think it's a very, very important and crucial piece of the Satoshi Kon canon in general, so I think it's sort of a mistake to exclude it. Alright, so then our friend Basil's got a couple questions here. I'm gonna skip down to some of them, because some of them we've kind of already talked about. So what made us choose this compilation to review now? Well, at least for me personally, like I wanted to revisit Memories because of the hype around Robot Carnival, and like Memories is sort of like the little brother of Robot Carnival in some ways. And I know one of the more one of the more like straight up reasons why we decided to do this one is because Bill bought it recently.
Well, for me personally, I've been wanting to explore more anime movies because that are beyond Miyazaki. Because I think just with how the anime season cycle works, where people are so glued into the TV cycle that movies kind of get lost unless they're Miyazaki or they're Mamoru Hosoda. So I wanted to explore. I'm hoping to explore more anime movies on the podcast. Like, I like to do maybe some of Takahata's work. I'd like to do maybe the Animatrix, more anthology movies like Robot Carnival, maybe, stuff like that.
We sort of already touched on this, but do you still think that? Do you think there are still messages in this that stand true for us today? Yeah, I think we talked about that.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the one we didn't touch upon is, if you see a big blue jar, cartoony jar full of pills, like Pac-Man pills, maybe don't take one without, maybe wait.
I'm swallowing that whole bottle. I got nothing left to live for.
I should have played him. There's a great old 80s ad called We're Not Candy, which basically saying this medicine is not candy. You should not eat this, kids. He should have been shown that PSA. Then
well,
he
they shouldn't make it look like candy if it's not candy.
Everything's candy, okay?
If you try hard enough, yes.
Mm-hmm. So what is the neatest visual flair in the work? So whenever I think about what visual flair is, I think of like stuff that's just like cool for the sake of being cool, or like flashy or whatever. And I would say that I don't know if I would necessarily call like the beautiful Baroque architecture of Magnetic Rose to be like visual flair, so to speak. So my pick for that would be like just the nature animation in Stink Bomb, like with all the flower petals falling and the plants and the trees and all the texture to it. That's what I would pick. Anybody else?
I agree with you. Excuse me. That and the nature, even though it's computer generated in Magnetic Rose, because I'm a sucker for pretty scenery, pretty nature, and just seeing that against the like industrial type looking stuff is always really neat.
Definitely. There's a lot of really good visual contrast in that one.
I think for me, the one piece of flair throughout at least the first two films was just like that smooth animation quality that reminded me a lot of watching Akira. Just something that I think stood out to me then as a fledgling anime nerd was not just the material you're watching, but just how nice it looks, like taking it in.
Bill?
Tobias basically said what I would say. So
you're a man of excellent taste, Bill.
Is there a moment that stood out to you? Yes, all of them, except Stink Bomb did not stand out for Bill at all. So, how does this compare to some of Otomo's other works, Steam Boy or Memories or Akira? So, I mean, it's hard to compare Akira to. It's hard to compare like a feature narrative to an anthology, but I think in terms of like animation quality, it's pretty on up there with Akira, I'd say. In terms of Steam Boy sort of suffers from like the early 2000s sort of digi-paint look, I think, and it's not necessarily like unwatchable to look at, but it definitely doesn't have that sort of tactile, very high budget, high level like cell animation that really makes Akira and Memories look just like pristine. Steam Boy doesn't really have that.
I mean, at this point, I think I should ask, since I think you two are the only seen it. What about Short Piece? How does this compare with Short Piece?
I don't remember a single thing from Short Piece. I'm going to be really upfront with you.
Is that been released anywhere?
Yeah, it's been released by Sentai Filmworks.
Okay.
So I haven't seen the whole thing since you and I saw it, Tori, but I have revisited it in some ways in like clips and stuff. So Short Piece has a lot more variety, and I want to say that it has 5 shorts instead of just 3.
It's 4.
4 shorts?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I think they are the ones that I remember. They have a lot more visual distinction between them. Like there's one of them that is completely CG animation, but it's like high level CG stuff. It's like sort of on par with like Batman Ninja, but a little bit more I guess like the faces didn't quite have the problems that Batman Ninja did. It's a little bit higher quality than that. And then there's a couple more that just have a very unique visual style to them and that are done in 2D. And then there's one that's like very, very like realistic. It's one of them that Koji Morimoto considered doing for Memories. It was based on another Otomo short called A Farewell to Weapons.
I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah, that's the one. And they ended up doing that one in Short Piece. I couldn't really tell you much about it or what I thought of it because I really don't remember it very well. But I generally enjoyed Short Piece a lot. I think that just like Memories, there are some that are, well, there's some that are better than others, but they're all good in their own way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really like Short Piece. I would highly recommend it. That if now that High Dive stuff is showing up on Verve, if Short Piece ends up on Verve, yeah, definitely watch it because it's good. Like if you like Otomo's stuff, there's definitely something in Short Piece that you'll appreciate.
For sure.
All right. So, okay, now Austin is cruel and mean to anime, so rank these in order from best to bestest. I think this is in response to me giving the axe to Little Witch Academia in the Halloween special, to which I tell Basil I love Little Witch Academia deeply. I just had to make a very hard decision.
It's very true.
I don't want to be mean to anime, especially not that one, because that one is my child. Because so many of my children are in it.
I would say Little Witch Academia is probably my favorite short from this piece.
I'd say so too. It's probably the best piece of Memories entirely. And Little Witch Academia is my favorite scene in AKIRA as well.
So just like take a step back and imagine, like, what would Magneto Rose look like if instead of Miguel and Heinz and the other crew, like, what if it were like Akko, Susie, and
be weird.
What would happen if they just showed up?
I mean, I'd watch it.
Susie would go in the simulation for sure.
Oh yeah, no question.
Akka would be like, we can make friends with this computer-generated ghost lady because friendship fixes everything.
I more see, like, Akko could totally be a stand-in for Tanaka and Stink Bomb. Bless her heart.
Yeah, I could.
Oh, man.
Alright, so I guess if we're ranking these in order from best to bestest, bestest would be Magnetic Rose. I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But since Bill hates Stink Bomb so much, I mean, that would be my number 2. But I also like Cannon Fodder, so they're about tied for me.
Again, I like the visuals of Stink Bomb. I just don't like that I don't like that guy, and I can't get past the logic problems of that movie.
Well, then let me just rephrase that you have more problems with it than some of us do.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's okay. So, would we be putting Stink Bomb in the middle or at the end? Tori, you're the tiebreaker.
Personally, I would put Stink Bomb in the middle because I enjoyed it more than Cannon Fodder, but what do I know?
Tobias, can you live with that decision, or must you object?
No, I think they're. I mean, it's once you. I mean, Magnetic Rose is the clear winner naturally. Yep. I think. Yeah, we all agree with that.
Landslide.
The other two, I mean, it just kind of depends on your personal taste.
It's very true.
I liked Cannon Fodder more than I thought I would, and I think maybe that's why I put it second. But they're all really, really good shorts.
Seems like we're coming in at an even 50-50 here, so my answer is there is no answer for the second parts other than Magnetic Rose is the best.
It's everyone's favorite ending. A tie. Everyone loves a tie.
Man, now I want some pad thai.
Man, it's only like 12:30. We can do it. It's 1 o'clock. Christ. We can do
Where's
this.
my 24-hour Thai restaurant? But anyway, I think that is a wonderful place for us to end our episode because it is very, very late, and I really appreciate you guys for sticking into it and getting this review done. So thank you guys so much. Wanted to remind everyone, yet again, like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we will be giving away a free copy of Volume 1 of the Rose of Versailles, and the way that you can enter into the contest to win that is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes specifically, and then we will be announcing the winners in our Facebook community. So if you are not already part of the Facebook community group, make sure to get yourself in there so that you can see if you have won or not. And we are very excited to be able to give you guys a piece of such a very good anime that is only going to be more difficult to get a hold of. And thank you, Bill, for facilitating that.
It's my pleasure.
All right, and thank you all again for joining us for a podcast episode. Tobias, where can people talk to you on the internet about anime?
Well, you really can't. You can type at me, but you can't really talk at me.
They can hear you, so you can talk to them, but they can't talk to you.
That's true. So if you were to type words at me at Twitter, at Reverend_Tobias, I may or may not read them on a podcast and make fun of you.
That goes double for me. Tori, where can people talk to you on the internet?
Triple for me. However, you can find me on the twitter.com at worstwaifu, where usually I am screaming about something.
Mr. Bill Lupon III, where can people find you?
I am WBForeman999 on Twitter, where you can hear me talk about Red Dead 2, which I'm currently playing, and how it's a beautiful / very frustrating game. Or you can talk to me about how the latest One Piece episode was awesome, and that it's getting good. Talk to me about One Piece.
Cool.
Please talk to Bill about One Piece. Somebody.
He needs a friend. And as for me, you can find me over on Twitter at BebopShock. That's Bebop as in Cowboy Bebop, and Shock as in I am attached to some electricity. And you can find general Third Impact related stuff mainly over at our website, which is thirdimpactanime.wordpress.com. Our podcast is available on most all of the platforms, including the one that you're listening to right now, which you should totally give us a star rating or a review on. We would really appreciate that very, very, very much. And keep up with us over on Facebook at facebook.com/thirdimpactanime, and come join our Facebook community group. We make that terrible website a little bit better, one cool anime news article at a time.
Not me. I
So thank you
bully
guys so
everybody
much for
on
joining
Twitter.
us. Well, except for Tori. She's here to cause chaos. Unfiltered chaos. Like throwing the coffee beans directly into the back of the coffee maker.
Yep. Little
All right,
victories.
folks, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.